The mountain has claimed over 330 lives since records began, not from avalanches or storms, but from believing deadly lies about the mountain. The most dangerous enemy isn't the cold or the altitude. It's the myths that make climbers feel safe when they're not. A rope tested to 5,000 pounds at sea level fails at 1,200 pounds after one season on Everest. The climber, trusting that rope with his life, never knew the mathematics had changed. Modern Everest looks sanitized. Aluminum ladders span every crevasse. Fixed ropes guide climbers up technical sections. GPS units ping satellites every few minutes. Weather forecasts arrive hourly from meteorological centers worldwide. The mountain appears conquered by human engineering. This technological illusion kills more climbers than any storm system. The 2019 season proved the deadly mathematics of misplaced confidence. That viral photograph of hundreds of climbers queued on the summit ridge revealed the trap. When fixed rope systems became crowded, climbers made fatal calculations. They unclipped from safety lines to pass slower teams, gambling their lives on seconds of free climbing at 28,000 feet. The arithmetic was brutal. Every unclipped moment increased the probability of death exponentially. Yet climbers took these risks because they trusted the rope system to catch them if they fell back onto the line. Here's what equipment manufacturers don't advertise. Fixed ropes degrade rapidly in the death zone. Ultraviolet radiation at altitude breaks down synthetic fibers faster than at sea level. Ice expansion and contraction stress anchor points beyond design specifications. Wind-driven debris cuts through protective sheaths like razor blades. Myth 2. The death zone is just about altitude. Brain cells start dying in minutes. Cognitive function collapses. The climber with perfect oxygen supply makes fatal decisions anyway. Most climbers think altitude is the primary killer above 8,000 meters. They focus on atmospheric pressure, oxygen partial pressure, and acclimatization protocols. This understanding misses the real executioner. The real killer is time. At 26,247 feet, atmospheric pressure drops to 1/3 of sea level values. But altitude alone doesn't explain why climbers with adequate oxygen supplies and clear weather make obviously fatal decisions. The death zone begins killing the moment climbers cross that threshold, regardless of preparation or equipment. Every minute above 8,000 meters causes irreversible cellular damage. Hypoxia doesn't simply reduce oxygen availability, it triggers cascading physiological failures that compound exponentially. Brain cells begin dying within the first 10 minutes of exposure. Cognitive function deteriorates rapidly. Decision-making capacity collapses in predictable patterns. The biological clock starts ticking the moment climbers enter the death zone. Even with supplemental oxygen flowing at 4 liters per minute, cellular damage accumulates relentlessly. The human body cannot adapt to this environment. It can only survive temporarily before critical systems begin shutting down. 60% of Everest deaths happen during descent. The celebration of reaching the summit becomes a death sentence. Popular mountaineering wisdom holds that the summit push represents peak danger on Everest. Media coverage focuses on dramatic ascent attempts. Climbers plan extensively for reaching the top. Summit Day receives the most preparation and attention. This focus creates a deadly blind spot. Statistical analysis reveals that most fatalities occur during descent, not during the summit push itself. The numbers tell a brutal story. 60% of Everest deaths happen while descending from the summit. Climbers who successfully reach the top face their highest mortality risk on the way down. The psychological celebration of summit success creates cognitive traps that kill experienced mountaineers. The traverse between South Summit and True Summit explains this pattern perfectly. The route involves technical climbing on narrow ridges with massive exposure on both sides. Climbers navigate this section while cognitively impaired from prolonged hypoxia exposure. Coordination deteriorates. Balance becomes compromised. Simple tasks require enormous mental effort. Energy depletion mathematics compound the descent problem exponentially. Summit climbers typically burn 6,000 to 8,000 calories during the ascent from Camp 4. Human bodies can only store approximately 2,000 calories in readily available glycogen reserves. The massive deficit must come from fat metabolism, which requires significantly more oxygen than carbohydrate burning. By the time climbers reach the summit, they've exhausted easily accessible energy reserves. Their metabolic efficiency has decreased dramatically. Physical performance degrades rapidly. The descent requires sustained effort when their bodies are least capable of providing it. 16 Sherpas died in a single avalanche in 2014. Their genetic adaptations provided no protection against falling ice weighing thousands of tons. Their generations of mountain experience couldn't predict the collapse timing or escape route options. Western mountaineers perpetuate a dangerous misconception that genetic adaptation makes Sherpa populations immune to Everest's physiological dangers. This myth creates false assumptions about Sherpa capabilities while completely ignoring the brutal economic pressures that force them into disproportionate risk exposure. The mortality statistics tell a fundamentally different story than popular climbing narratives suggest. Sherpas die on Everest at rates that actually exceed Western climbers when exposure time is factored into the statistical equation. They spend significantly more days above base camp throughout each season. They carry heavier loads through technical terrain at extreme altitude. They work in the most dangerous sections of the mountain repeatedly. Their death rate per day of exposure actually surpasses that of paying clients by measurable margins. Genetic advantages exist but have absolute limits that Western climbers don't understand. Sherpa populations have evolved higher red blood cell counts than lowland populations. Their lung capacity exceeds normal ranges. Their oxygen utilization efficiency surpasses typical human parameters. Yet these adaptations cannot overcome the fundamental constraints of the death zone environment. Load carrying requirements further increase Sherpa mortality risk beyond genetic compensation abilities. Sherpa guides routinely carry 60 to 80-pound loads through technical terrain at altitude. Western climbers carry 20 to 30-pound packs during summit attempts. The additional weight increases energy expenditure exponentially, reduces mobility on technical terrain, and compromises balance on narrow ridges with massive exposure. Economic pressures force Sherpa guides into risk scenarios that Western climbers would never accept voluntarily. A single Everest season can provide income equivalent to multiple years of local wages. Families depend on expedition earnings for basic survival. Refusing dangerous assignments means losing employment opportunities that may not return. The 2014 avalanche in the Khumbu icefall killed 16 Sherpa guides in seconds. They were establishing routes and carrying loads for Western expeditions. The families of those 16 men received $400 each in compensation from the Nepalese government. Their lives were valued at less than the cost of a Western climber's high-altitude boots. GPS systems fail when batteries freeze at -40 degrees. Satellite phones stop transmitting when ice forms over antennas. Weather forecasting becomes meaningless when Everest generates its own storm systems faster than satellites can track them. The 1996 disaster happened despite accurate meteorological predictions. Weather services predicted the storm system's arrival within hours of its actual onset. Yet experienced guides ignored deteriorating conditions because they trusted their technological weather windows. The forecast said they had time. The mountain's jet stream behavior disagreed. Oxygen systems create the deadliest false confidence of all. Climbers believe supplemental oxygen restores normal cognitive function. The mathematics prove otherwise. Standard flow rates of 2 to 4 liters per minute provide only partial pressure relief. The brain still operates in severe hypoxic conditions. Oxygen regulators malfunction when ice crystals form in valves. Masks freeze to faces in extreme cold. Bottles run empty faster than calculated when physical exertion increases consumption rates. The technology meant to sustain life becomes dead weight when systems fail. Rob Hall's final radio transmission became legendary. "I have Doug with me. He's run out of oxygen." The supplemental oxygen system that promised to extend their survival window had failed at the critical moment. They died not from lack of preparation, but from over-reliance on technology that couldn't deliver when conditions deteriorated. The brutal economics remain unchanged. Every piece of modern equipment adds weight to loads that must be carried through the death zone. Every additional pound increases energy expenditure when bodies can least afford the metabolic cost. The gear meant to ensure survival often prevents climbers from moving fast enough to escape deteriorating conditions. Technology promises to eliminate risk. The mountain eliminates the technology instead. Scott Fisher had summited Everest without oxygen. He had climbed K2, Lhotse, and dozens of major peaks. His expertise was unquestioned. He died making decisions a novice might have avoided. The veteran climber fallacy runs deep in mountaineering culture. Climbers assume years of experience eliminate risk. Multiple successful ascents create confidence. Technical expertise builds trust in decision-making abilities. This assumption kills experienced climbers at alarming rates. Statistical analysis reveals a disturbing pattern. Veteran mountaineers die on Everest at rates comparable to novice climbers. Experience does not provide immunity from the mountain's constraints. In some cases, it creates additional vulnerabilities through overconfidence bias. Fisher's death in 1996 exemplifies this paradox perfectly. He had summited Everest without supplemental oxygen in 1994. His technical skills were unquestioned. His physical conditioning was exceptional. His knowledge of Everest's routes was encyclopedic. Yet Fisher made fatal decisions that novice climbers might have avoided. He delayed his descent from the summit despite deteriorating weather conditions. He exhausted himself helping slower clients instead of maintaining energy reserves. He ignored clear physiological warning signs of altitude sickness. The overconfidence bias explains these failures. Experienced climbers develop pattern recognition that works in most mountain environments. They learn to read weather signs, assess route conditions, and manage energy expenditure efficiently. This expertise creates confidence in their decision-making abilities. But Everest operates beyond normal mountaineering parameters. The death zone impairs cognitive function regardless of experience level. Hypoxia affects veteran climbers' brains identically to novice climbers' brains. Years of training cannot overcome basic physiological constraints. Green Boots became trapped in a limestone cave below the northeast ridge's first step, conscious and responsive for days. Multiple expedition teams passed his location. He couldn't ascend. He couldn't descend. The mountain had made the choice for him. The retreat myth pervades mountaineering culture completely. Climbers believe descent is always an option when conditions deteriorate. Weather forecasts provide advance warning of dangerous systems. Physical exhaustion signals when to abandon summit attempts. Rational decision-making ensures safe retreat to lower camps. This belief kills climbers who discover too late that retreat isn't physically possible. Weather window reality creates the first constraint that eliminates retreat options. Storm systems on Everest develop rapidly and persist for days without warning. Climbers caught above 8,000 meters during weather deterioration cannot safely descend through whiteout conditions. Visibility drops to zero instantly. Winds exceed 100 miles per hour without buildup. temperatures plummet below survivable limits within hours. The commitment zone begins at the South Col at 26,000 feet. Once climbers ascend above Camp 4, they enter terrain where retreat becomes increasingly difficult with each step. Camp 4 provides the last reliable shelter before the summit push. Above that point, climbers must continue upward or risk exposure death during extended descent attempts. The physical point of no return follows predictable physiological timelines that ignore human determination. Hypothermia. Onset occurs within hours when climbers cannot maintain core body temperature through movement. Energy depletion prevents sustained downward movement. Dehydration impairs cognitive function required for route finding. These factors combine to create situations where retreat becomes impossible regardless of weather conditions or equipment functionality. The supplemental oxygen misconception kills climbers who believe bottled oxygen restores normal cognitive function above 8,000 meters. Flow rate mathematics reveal the deadly gap between perception and reality. Standard oxygen systems deliver 2 to 4 liters per minute through regulators designed for extreme altitude conditions. Climbers breathing this flow rate experience partial pressure relief but remain in severe hypoxic states. Their brains still operate with dramatically reduced oxygen availability compared to sea level conditions. The false confidence trap proves fatal when climbers make aggressive decisions based on feeling better rather than understanding their actual physiological state. Supplemental oxygen masks symptoms of altitude sickness without eliminating the underlying cellular damage. Climbers feel capable of complex decision-making while their cognitive function remains severely impaired. Mask malfunction. Reality compounds these problems exponentially. Ice formation blocks air passages in extreme cold. Valve mechanisms freeze in sub-zero temperatures. Regulator systems fail when moisture crystallizes in critical components. The technology meant to sustain life becomes a suffocation hazard when systems malfunction. David Sharp's oxygen system failure illustrates this deadly dependency. His regulator malfunctioned during his final summit attempt in 2006. Without supplemental oxygen, he became incapacitated near Green Boot's location. Multiple climbers encountered Sharp, but couldn't provide sustained assistance. He died because his survival plan depended entirely on technology that failed at the critical moment. The weight penalty analysis reveals another brutal calculation. Oxygen bottles and delivery systems add substantial weight to climbers' loads. Each bottle weighs approximately 4 pounds when full. Most summit attempts require multiple bottles per climber. The additional weight increases energy expenditure exponentially when carried through technical terrain at extreme altitude. The adaptation myth suggests that proper acclimatization eliminates altitude sickness risks above 8,000 meters. Climbers follow rigid schedules, climbing high and sleeping low, believing this process creates immunity to the death zone's physiological constraints. Medical reality proves far more complex and unforgiving. Individual physiological variation creates deadly unpredictability that no acclimatization protocol can eliminate. Genetic factors influence oxygen utilization efficiency, red blood cell production rates, and susceptibility to cerebral and pulmonary edema. Some climbers develop severe symptoms within hours of entering the death zone, despite perfect acclimatization schedules. Others maintain apparent function for longer periods before sudden, catastrophic collapse. Even perfectly acclimatized climbers face absolute biological limits. The human body cannot adapt to survive indefinitely above 8,000 meters. Acclimatization provides temporary physiological adjustments that degrade rapidly with prolonged exposure. Cellular damage accumulates regardless of preparation quality or timeline duration. The time limit truth reveals acclimatization's fundamental constraints. Physiological adaptations begin deteriorating within days of reaching extreme altitude. Red blood cell counts that increase during acclimatization cannot be maintained above 7,000 meters. Cardiovascular efficiency improvements reverse rapidly in the death zone environment. Pulmonary edema onset demonstrates why acclimatization fails catastrophically. High-altitude pulmonary edema can develop suddenly in climbers who showed no previous symptoms. Fluid accumulates in lung tissue faster than the body can compensate. Even climbers with extensive high-altitude experience die from HAPE when their physiological limits are exceeded. The forecast fallacy kills climbers who trust modern meteorology to guarantee safe climbing conditions on Everest's summit pyramid. Jet stream behavior creates 200-mile-per-hour winds with minimal advance warning, turning perfect weather into deadly storms within hours. Barometric pressure mathematics reveal the brutal reality of Everest's weather systems. A pressure drop of just 10 millibars can signal catastrophic wind development. Most climbers don't carry barometers or understand pressure trend interpretation. They rely on base camp radio reports and satellite weather data that becomes obsolete before reaching them. The 1996 storm system that killed 8 climbers developed exactly as meteorologists predicted. Weather services provided accurate forecasts of the approaching system's timing and intensity. Yet experienced guides ignored deteriorating conditions because they trusted their weather window calculations. The forecast indicated sufficient time for summit attempts and safe descent. The mountain's jet stream behavior disagreed completely. Everest's pyramid shape accelerates wind patterns unpredictably. Temperature gradients between the mountain's faces create sudden pressure differentials. Atmospheric conditions change faster than satellite systems can track or predict accurately. Microclimate reality compounds forecasting limitations exponentially. Everest generates its own weather systems, independent of regional atmospheric patterns. The mountain's massive thermal mass creates convection currents that develop into localized storm systems. These micro-weather events appear with minimal warning and dissipate rapidly, making accurate prediction impossible. The commitment trap explains why climbers ignore deteriorating conditions despite accurate weather information. Teams invest enormous resources, reaching high camps during narrow weather windows. Psychological pressure to continue overrides rational assessment of changing conditions. Climbers gamble their lives on weather forecasts that cannot account for Everest's unique atmospheric behavior. The heartless climber narrative dominates media portrayals of Everest deaths. News reports describe callous mountaineers stepping over dying climbers to reach personal summit goals. Documentary films emphasize the apparent lack of compassion among expedition members. This narrative fundamentally misunderstands the medical reality of rescue attempts in the death zone. Death zone physiology eliminates the capacity for heroic rescue efforts that work at lower altitudes. Cognitive impairment prevents climbers from making complex decisions about rescue logistics. Physical deterioration eliminates the strength required to assist another person. Survival instinct overrides compassionate responses when brain function deteriorates from prolonged hypoxia exposure. David Sharp's death illustrates these constraints perfectly. Multiple climbers encountered Sharp near Green Boots location on the Northeast Ridge in 2006. He was conscious but unable to move independently. Several expedition members offered oxygen bottles and attempted communication, yet none could provide the sustained physical assistance required to move him to safety. The brutal arithmetic of death zone rescue attempts usually creates more casualties rather than saving lives. Attempting to assist collapsed climbers requires enormous energy expenditure when rescuers' reserves are already depleted. It extends exposure time in lethal conditions for multiple people. Most rescue attempts result in additional deaths rather than successful evacuations. Medical analysis reveals why rescue efforts above 8,000 meters fail catastrophically. Hypothermic victims cannot generate body heat independently. Hypoxic climbers cannot maintain consciousness during movement attempts. Exhausted individuals cannot contribute to their own rescue efforts. These factors combine to make rescue attempts logistically impossible rather than morally questionable. Popular misconceptions suggest Mount Everest's entire surface is covered with corpses and garbage visible to every climbing team. Media reports emphasize environmental damage and body visibility across the mountain's vast terrain. Statistical reality contradicts these dramatic portrayals significantly. Over 200 bodies remain on Everest from 330 total deaths since record-keeping began. However, most remains are completely invisible to climbing teams and expedition members. Bodies fall into crevasses, become buried by snow accumulation, or lie in areas far from established climbing routes. Concentrated waste areas exist primarily at established camp locations rather than across the mountain's massive terrain. Base camp generates the most visible garbage accumulation. Camps 1, 2, 3, and 4 contain most equipment abandonment and human waste problems. The climbing routes themselves remain relatively clean between these concentrated areas. Modern cleanup efforts remove substantial debris annually from Everest's climbing routes. In 2024 alone, Nepalese government teams removed 11 tons of garbage and 5 bodies from the mountain. Drone technology now assists with waste removal operations, carrying loads that would normally require multiple Sherpa porters and create additional risk exposure. Mandatory deposit systems require expedition teams to remove their own waste or forfeit substantial financial bonds. These regulations have dramatically reduced new garbage accumulation compared to previous decades of unregulated climbing activity. Body recovery operations have also increased substantially, removing visible remains from high-traffic areas. One wealthy client's final radio transmission became legendary for its tragic delusion. "I paid for this. Someone has to help me." The mountain doesn't accept payment plans. It only collects in full. The wealthy tourist myth represents the final dangerous misconception about Everest accessibility and success requirements. Expedition companies market Everest as achievable for anyone with adequate financial resources and basic fitness levels. Premium guide services promise to handle technical challenges and logistical complications. Cost breakdown reveals the myth's fundamental limitations immediately. Guided expeditions range from $40,000 to $100,000 or significantly more for premium services. But money cannot purchase the years of cardiovascular preparation required for summit success. Physical conditioning, technical skill development, and altitude acclimatization cannot be compressed into shorter timelines, regardless of expedition budget levels. In 2019, multiple well-funded climbers died despite hiring the most experienced guide services and using the best available equipment. Their substantial financial investments provided mountain access, but couldn't overcome basic physiological limitations or time constraints. Money creates dangerous dependency relationships that increase mortality risk rather than reducing it. Wealthy clients often lack the independent skills needed when situations deteriorate beyond guide capabilities. They cannot assess their own physical condition accurately. They cannot make critical decisions about continuing or retreating. They cannot perform self-rescue when guides become unavailable or incapacitated. Statistical analysis reveals the direct correlation between preparation time and summit success rates, regardless of financial investment levels. Climbers who spend 2 to 3 years preparing specifically for Everest achieve summit success rates exceeding 60%. Those who attempt the mountain with less than 1 year of preparation succeed less than 30% of the time, regardless of expedition costs or guide quality. Everest doesn't negotiate with human beliefs or financial resources. It only responds to biological reality. The arithmetic remains unforgiving. 330 deaths and counting. Each fatality represents someone who believed at least one of these deadly lies. Hit that like button if this analysis opened your eyes to the mountain's real dangers. Subscribe and ring the bell for more forensic breakdowns of mountaineering's deadliest misconceptions.